All right, welcome to Social Studies for Tuesday. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to read through a lot of this and go over it, and then I'll turn you loose on your couple of questions. Again, make sure you answer in complete sentences. It's really not funny when you all answer not with a capital letter and you don't put a punctuation mark at the end. And there is going to be more than one question, so you have to have at least two sentences. Okay, it's time for you to do that. If you don't know how to make a capital letter on your keyboard or phone or device, whatever you're using, ask whoever's at your house with you, how do you make a capital letter? Okay. Again, we're talking about the colonist here, and for the next section, the French and Indian War and everything's over. So really, the colonists that we're talking about, these are the British colonists. These are the ones that came over from England. These are the ones that are under rule of King George III and Parliament. Parliament is the government over in England. But those are the colonists that we're talking about. So I don't want you to get confused about who they are, where they're from, etc. All right, so we're going to begin with the Stamp Act. It says in 1765, Parliament approved another tax law, the Stamp Act, put a tax on many paper items coming into the colonies. Newspapers, legal documents, and even playing cards had to have a special stamp on them to show that the tax had been paid. So we have a new tax. It's called the Stamp Act, and basically it was on paper products that were being imported into the colonies. These are paper products coming over from England into the colonies. England wanted the colonists to pay a tax on this. Again, they're trying to get money for the war and other things. The colonists were not happy, so they came up with this idea of no taxation without representation. Here's what that means. It says British leaders felt that the tax was fair. Parliament, those people over there, they said, this is fair. We helped you with the war. You owe us money. Many colonists, however, were angry. They said that Britain could not tax them because they had no representation in Parliament. No one was speaking or acting for them. Mercy Otis Warren, this is a person's name, Mercy Otis Warren, a Massachusetts writer, disagreed with the new tax. She began writing plays that accused British leaders of being greedy. In Virginia, a different person, Patrick Henry, told other members of the House of Burgesses that Parliament did not represent the colonies. Those who supported Parliament's actions shouted, treason, treason. By accusing Henry of treason, they were saying he, Henry, was guilty of working against his own government. Let me explain what this is happening here. Parliament is over in England making these laws because there's no American colonist over there in Parliament that's saying, well, from our point of view, this is unfair. Basically, they're saying we're not being represented because you don't get to hear what we have to say about this tax. Because we don't get our say, or even you can't even hear us, it's not fair. So that's why they're saying no taxation without representation. Now, some people living in the colonies said, it's okay that Parliament is doing this. And if you're disagreeing with Parliament, that's kind of an act of treason. That means you're going against the government based off of their rules. So even in the colonies, there were two kind of groups of people. Those that disagreed with the tax, which was the majority, and then some that actually said, well, we are kind of English people, Britain people, we probably need to pay the tax. But that was not the majority. So in October 1765, representatives from the 9 colonies met in New York City in what became known as the Stamp Act Congress. A Congress is a formal meeting of representatives. There, the colonial leaders spoke out against the Stamp Act. Soon, people began to repeat these words: no taxation without representation. The colonies sent delegates to this meeting, the Stamp Act meeting that was held in New York City. They got together, all 9 colonies at this time, and said, we don't agree with what Britain is doing, what Parliament is doing. And the battle cry that came out of this was no taxation without representation. So again, the majority of the people living in the colonies did not agree with this, and now they have met about it, and they officially they don't agree with this. So let's see what happens next. Colonists work together. Many colonists tried to force Britain to take back the Stamp Act. Some wrote letters to Parliament. Some chose not to buy tax goods. Others began to boycott or refuse to buy all British goods. So here's what they came up with. One, some people decided to write to Parliament and say, hey, this isn't fair. You need to repeal it or take it back. You need to abolish it. Some people just decided not to buy those paper products. They was like, oh, if they're going to tax me, I'm not buying it. Some people just said, I'm not buying anything that's coming from Britain. They just totally said, I'm not buying anything else that's coming from them. And so that kind of hurt because obviously they're losing money. The Sons and Daughters of Liberty. Soon after the Stamp Act was passed, a group of colonists called the Sons and Daughters of Liberty began to work against it. To most colonists, liberty meant freedom to make their own laws. The Sons of Liberty captured several British workers who tried to collect the tax. They covered these tax collectors with sticky tar and then dumped feathers on them. The Sons of Liberty also chased tax collectors out of their towns. So again, Britain, they hired these people to come over into the colonies and collect this tax. Well, the members, they started this party called the Sons and Daughters of Liberty. They didn't like them. They didn't like them they wanted their own laws. And so when these tax collectors came knocking for their money, one of the punishments that they gave the tax collectors, because they didn't agree with it, is they dumped tar on them, which is a real sticky oil. It's a real sticky substance. Like if you had tar on you, it'd be really hard to wash off. And then once you got this sticky substance on you, they dumped feathers on you. So you're walking around town looking like a chicken, literally. Again, this was extreme form of punishment because one, you couldn't get that tar off of you, and two, everybody could see you coming because you look like a chicken, and it was very humiliating. Women also took action against the Stamp Act. They formed their own group known as the Daughters of Liberty. Members of the group spun thread and wove their own cloth instead of buying British cloth. The cloth was so popular that women in Providence, Rhode Island chose a large place in which to make it, the city courthouse. So the women, they started making their own cloth, which meant I didn't need to buy it from British, which again probably upset them because one, they weren't selling their goods, they weren't making any money, and they couldn't tax it. And so it was just overall not good for Britain. It was very popular, and it kind of showed that, hey, maybe we don't need Britain for all this stuff that we're getting. Finally, the Stamp Act was repealed. In 1776, so many colonists opposed the Stamp Act that Parliament voted to repeal or take back the act. Basically, they said, okay, we're not going to tax you on the paper products. You win. We're not going to do it. It's done. No more taxes. Parliament, but then, however, Parliament passed the Declaratory Act the very next day. It said that Britain had full power to make laws for the people in America in all cases. The new law started to worry many colonists. All right, so let me just explain this real quick. Again, they repealed the Stamp Act. They're not going to tax them on paper products. But the very next day in Parliament, without the colonist representation, they made a law, and it was called I just lost it. I'm sorry. It was called the Declaratory Act. And all that means is Britain is saying, Parliament is saying, it is fair for us to make laws that the colonists have to follow, no matter what. All right. So what I would like you to do, go to Schoology, open up Tuesday's e-learning assignment in social studies. Actually, this is going to be in the math folder. If you go to the math course, you'll see the social studies assignment. Just click on it and submit it. You're going to have 2 questions. You're going to have to write 2 answers. They have to be in complete sentences. Do not Make sure you capitalize both sentences. Make sure you put a punctuation mark after both sentences. If you read the question and you do not know the answer to this, you need to come back to this video, watch it again, and get the right answer. All right.